Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Deacon and Taylor sneak out of Los Angeles and head to Italy. Spoilers for Bold and the Beautiful. Before she allowed him to describe the shift, Deacon Sharp saw it. He had learned to read certain aspects of people, such as the way Taylor's fingers lingered on a mug she had always loved, the way her laugh came late with a sweetness he had never heard before, and the way her eyes, which were typically so polished with the practiced calm of a counselor, wandered to the window as if she were mapping the horizon. "Where are you?" he inquired one evening while they were sitting on the patio of the Cliff House. The vast, uncaring water moved as it usually did. She turned to face him and said the one thing she hadn't said in a long time. "I want to flee." Deacon smiled instantly and disarmingly. "Where? New York City? Paris? Somewhere pasta is better than it is in Los Angeles." Taylor gave a bright, astonished smile. "Italy," she said. "Somewhere with leisurely mornings, olive trees, and people who apologize in great detail and call it art." Then, like a guy who has mastered the art of gathering tiny favors, he took her hand. "Stop talking. I'm in. When are we going to depart?" In the past, this kind of careless inquiry would have prompted Taylor to list all the advantages and disadvantages. She would be the first to enumerate the reasons why not: jobs, children, reputations, responsibilities, and midnight emails. However, she had had enough of taking the blame for everyone else's silence. True, the bell in her chest had rung. "Tonight," she said. "Tonight we depart." The setting up. A form of choreography in and of itself is secrecy. Taylor and Deacon navigated it like dancers, taking precise, fast steps that sidestepped the household's typical rhythms. Using a thinly veiled excuse about a cultural exchange, Taylor called in a favor to a travel agent she had known in a charity circle. Deacon spent the afternoon at his workshop under the guise of repairs, selling a piece of furniture for cash. She took out an envelope of bills she had been saving for emergencies, not because she needed money but rather because she thought travel was better without paper trails. They were light packers. Taylor picked out well-folded outfits, a homey-smelling cardigan, and a scarf that could be used as a parasol. Tucked away were a hammer, a worn-out leather jacket, and a sketchbook filled with sketches he had only ever drawn in his spare time. When needed, they left notes. For example, Ridge received a postcard that stated, "Taking overnight for an out-of-state lecture back tomorrow," and Brooke received a text that said, "Running away with Deacon for a day, don't tell Ridge." The smooth little lies felt necessary. They clutched hands like young children full of promise on the way to LAX. The freeway gave way to the dark stretch of night, and Taylor felt the bell ring in a different way. Full and right, as if it had reached the location it had been waiting for. The city with its freeways, strip malls, and neon restaurants receded. Their faces half-tilted with the concealment of individuals doing something both truthful and guilty. They boarded under hurried names. Taylor slept on the plane, and Deacon observed her as if she were learning a map by heart. He had witnessed her at both her most wounded and professional moments, but now this peaceful face appeared to belong to someone rediscovering who she was. The chilly Italian night enveloped them like a promise as soon as they landed. With a skilled Italian roll, the driver announced the name of their destination: Costiera Amalfitana. Lights clung to cliff faces like strewn stars, and the coast's hills rose like a dream. Deacon muttered, "We could stay here forever." Softly and joyfully, Taylor laughed. "So let's start with the week." The arrival. Positano's vibrant hues, winding alleyways that plummeted to the lake, and laundry flapping like flags from long-forgotten conflicts all had the effect of an old movie. The air had a salt and lemon flavor. There was just the proper mix of urgency and drama in the town. People moved slowly enough to take in the sky's hue. Their motel was a slender home with bougainvillea that hung like hand-stitched curtains and terracotta tiles. The proprietor, Marco, a widowed sculptor who loved Americans because they were often taken aback, greeted them with the sharp mistrust of someone who had witnessed numerous lovers come and go. Like two conspirators, Taylor and Deacon crept into their chamber. The balcony overlooked the ocean. The sound was the planet's dependable, cherished voice. That first night, they dined at a little trattoria. She ordered pasta that tasted like forgiveness in the area, while he had the catch of the day. They strolled till the moon cast long, bold shadows over them and the cobblestone streets became familiar. Deacon drew the silhouette of Taylor's face in the moonlight that night. He remarked, "You're glad you came." She put her palm over his, the one that shuddered every time she wanted to say something difficult. Yes, she replied. I'm both scared and thrilled at the same time. Then Deacon gave her a slow confessional kiss. Then we'll be scared together. New routines. It was not necessary to be strict during the days in Italy. They provided a rhythm. Leisurely marketplaces, late coffee, and afternoons spent in museums teaching the modern how to touch ancient hands. Taylor discovered the luxury of doing nothing, allowing her thoughts to relax from the stress of living in Los Angeles. In a little leather notebook, she jotted down small details she intended to take home, such as an Italian phrase, a bakery's name, or the appearance of shade on a specific cathedral. Deacon was astonished by the hunger that led him to become a small-scale craftsman. In a workshop on a mountainside, he discovered an elderly carpenter who taught him the gentle religion of wood and new joints. Lorenzo, the carpenter, communicated by gestures and anecdotes that required an additional beat to understand due to the language barrier. Lorenzo said, "Wood remembers the hand that touches it," and Deacon absorbed the lesson. They occasionally quarreled over trivial matters, such as whether or not to purchase a piece of pottery, and they reconciled in the most delectable way possible by sneaking gelato and spending the night at the harbor watching fishermen breathe. They encountered locals, such as a cafe owner who showed Deacon how to flirt elegantly and a seamstress who recommended Taylor attempt learning to embroider. With a newfound sense of pride, Taylor observed Deacon, not the man who had stumbled, but the one who had stood up, brush in hand. They avoided social media, enjoying their privacy as much as they would a new romantic partner. Being simply referred to as two Americans on vacation was a privilege for two individuals accustomed to living on stage. But there are boundaries even in paradise. The remnants of both of their pasts may be found in Italy, despite its natural beauty. One afternoon, a text message that said, "We need to talk," buzzed across Deacon's phone. Sheila. He folded it like someone who had learnt to keep his wounds out of direct sunlight rather than opening it immediately. Taylor saw him read the message as if it were a knife. "Open it," she murmured softly. Yes, he did. The message was brief and characteristic of Sheila. An invitation to mischief and a call to drama. Deacon clenched his jaw. He said, "I'll call her and let her know I'm out of town." Without pressuring him, Taylor nodded. She had abandoned her responsibilities, but her empathy remained. A challenge and a gift. On the third day, Taylor got an unexpected invitation in the form of a carefully crafted Italian letter that was placed beneath the hotel door. The letter invited her to a medical humanities workshop, a modest cultural exchange taking place in Florence, where she might run into academics and artists. Dr. Alessandra Bianchi signed it, promising a venue where the healing arts and the fine arts shall converse. A flutter went through Taylor. The thought of speaking appealed to her in that delectable, polished manner that brought back memories of past selves. She had traveled to Italy in order to flee, but the nation graciously and resolutely presented an opportunity to expand the escape. As she thought about the invitation, Deacon observed. He said, "Go. You shouldn't pass up opportunities out of concern that we might violate the regulations. You are not here to run away from life. You came to discover it." She gave him a look. "How about you?" He grinned. "I'll attend. Or when you return I'll be here. I'll keep 2 chairs toasty." Together they visited Florence. The city was unusual. It was ferocious, metropolitan, and packed with history at a pace that made Taylor think of New York. After passing through galleries and museums, they arrived at the workshop and were greeted by Dr. Alessandra Bianchi, a woman with salt and pepper hair and eyes as stern as the sea. "You must be Taylor Hayes," Alessandra remarked in flawless English. "We have been exposed to your work via numerous avenues. We thought you might be interested in giving a talk about narrative medicine." Taylor said something. She discussed the healing power of narrative and the stories that patients share. She was reminded of why she had fallen in love with medicine, and why it had occasionally cost her other things by the tiny, diverse group of artists, doctors, and students who made up the audience. An older woman came up to them after the conversation. Her vibe was like linen, honest and sharp but softened by age. She extended a tiny package to Taylor. "From a friend," she stated. Later, when Taylor opened it, she saw a photograph folded like a promise, showing a younger Taylor with shorter hair and sharper eyes standing next to a lady she only vaguely remembered. "Morella, a nurse from her early years who had taught her a few stitches and a few laughs. In the picture, Morella was grinning in a way that reminded Taylor of her own heart. Taylor had started to receive fragments of a life she had believed to be long boxed from the small, well-planned world. Tension and temptations. Secrets create illusions, just as luxury and breathing do. With the subtlety of a thunderclap, the news from home arrived. Ridge called after Brooke sent a brief text message expressing concern. The chair Ridge had placed in his life for her was between the lines of his voice. It was reproachful, patient, and demanding of explanations. When Ridge eventually got her on a spotty signal, he said, "Taylor, what's going on? I've heard that you're in Italy." Ridge's constant concern was audible to Taylor. It was like a presence to her. "Hello, Ridge," she remarked. "We needed a break. I apologize for not telling you." Ridge's quiet was filled with longing and condemnation. At last he remarked, "Taylor, you're not answering to me. However, you are to the hospital and the kids. You are not allowed to disappear." A gentle chill entered Taylor's chest. "I am aware," she replied. "However, I have to keep in mind who I am outside of the walls that confine me. I don't think you will comprehend." The weight of something like to betrayal caused Ridge's voice to tremble. "I simply want you to be secure," she said, "and I want you to trust me." As two grown-ups in the middle of a small gap who both wanted the floor to be spanned, they spoke as though they had been wedded to the structure of existence. Taylor's pulse of duty quickened after the call. Returning late would have repercussions, including calls from the hospital board and rumors in Genoa City. However, there was also the option to stay a little while longer, which was shaky and felt like fresh blood. Deacon observed the conversation without sharing his thoughts with her. He wouldn't be the man to insist that she pick him over a past she had made promises to other people. But Taylor grabbed Ridge's hand when he hung up. She said, "I'm afraid I did the wrong thing. What if I destroyed everything?" Deacon's fingers found hers. He answered, "Then we'll fix it. Together." The storm. The sky opened in a storm on a high hill near Florence, as they do when a region needs to release its heat. They were stranded at a farmhouse with other tourists, including students, a dramatic old professor, and a harsh but compassionate landlady who demanded they eat. Deacon's past didn't show up that stormy night as an intruder, but rather as a choice made by Tom, an American who had previously worked with Sheila and was aware of the risky game she played. In a voice heavy with old remorse, he informed Deacon that Sheila had been spotted in Rome and had contacted some old acquaintances in an attempt to locate him. Deacon's expression hardened. "Is she present?" he insisted. Tom gave a head shake. "Not just yet. However, someone is curious about who you were with because they tracked your name." The moral terrain became more constricted. The route they had walked was larger than the planet, and home appeared in a different form. As a guy who had been reconstructing himself prepared to face the old tide, Taylor observed. She said, "You don't have to run. We can deal with it. Alternatively, we may decide to move away." Deacon regarded her query as though it were a map that he was still unable to interpret. He acknowledged, "I thought I could disappear here. I believed that the past wouldn't find me if I worked hard and put the hammer down. I was mistaken." Taylor pressed her forehead to his. The farm let out a breath as the storm slammed at the shutters. She muttered, "We'll do what we must. But we're here tonight, right now." They remained. The rain pounded the roof like a drummer rising to a crescendo as they clutched each other in the farmhouse. The night changed and offered them both something they had never experienced before. Commitment in the face of dread rather than flight. Choices and consequences. News never sleeps back in Genoa City. Whispers, screenshots, and a social media picture of a bench in Positano with Taylor's scarf visible are examples of the thin, urgent lines of social currency that tell stories. Concerned and a little enraged, Brooke drove to Ridge. How was she able to? Breathless with a chorus of bewilderment and rage, Brooke demanded. Ridge's response was the measured, mature reasoning of a man who was still incredibly in love. Brooke, she needed this. Her need to be entire cannot be stopped. A slight softening occurred in Brooke's eyes. We simply cannot allow the hospital or the family to appear as though we have neglected our responsibilities. Like adults who constantly make decisions with the future in mind, they chose to hold off. To let Taylor and Deacon to return home as they see fit. However, there would be a reckoning. As the days changed in Italy and Deacon received calls from people with long-standing grievances and allegiances, they came to a decision. Instead of running away, they would return home to deal with the fallout together. They would return as two individuals who had decided to change the way they loved and lived, not as runaways from their responsibilities. Deacon and Taylor ascended to a little terrace where the town stretched out like a treasure map on their final night in Positano. She had sewed him a tiny piece of linen into his jacket, the kind of tiny stitching that conveys, "I care enough to mend," and he had given her a small gift, an old charm bracelet that he had fixed. With a voice that sounded like a pledge, Taylor added, "We go home tomorrow." Deacon embraced her tightly. "No more secrets. Leave now," she declared. The sea watched like a slow, approving deity as they shared a slow, absolute kiss. Return. With their faces determined and their passports stamped, they took off for home. They were both waiting for the snap during the flight, which felt like a cord being pulled taut. When they arrived in Los Angeles, Ridge was waiting for them at the airport. He was steady, a little tired, and had a face that informed them that although the city had been maintained orderly, the price had been paid. He said, "You look like you've been on a different planet," in a tone that was both reassuring and cautionary. Taylor moved to the front. "We were," she declared. "And we've returned. We apologize." Ridge looked at both of them. "We'll have a conversation at home." They did. They told the ugly, honest truth of two people who had needed a break, not the kind of sanitized, PR-friendly truth. Anger and hurt were present, along with the hospital's practical planning and the subdued management of family life. Consequences included conversations to be had, professional reprimands, and missed meetings. However, there was also comprehension because Ridge understood what it meant to be human. With a history-shaped empathy, Brooke extended forgiveness. Taylor's presentation on burnout and resilience, the exact things Italy had granted her the opportunity to witness and speak for, was eventually accepted by the hospital board, despite their initial disbelief. After everyone had gone to bed and the house had descended into a creeping calm, Taylor and Deacon sat with mugs of tea and the gravity that bound two responsible individuals together in a more subdued room. "We succeeded," she muttered. "We did," he replied. "We do the work now." Small rituals, a weekly walk commitment, and a commitment to create a life that enabled them to breathe were just a few of the ways they incorporated the Italy they had touched into their everyday lives. In opposition to the world's inclination to expect them to always be something else, they would carry the names Amalfi and Florence like a secret talisman. Taylor's internal bell no longer rang in the same manner. It now chimed with its own chime, a gentle, unwavering reminder that life was about more than just the roles people gave her. It was also about the decisions she made for herself. For once, both of them allowed the future to seem like a place they could reach together as Deacon drew her into his arms. The next headline was whispered by the city beyond. Inside, two individuals gained a little more courage, honesty, and willingness to live on the brink of decision-making.